Hi there, my name is Matti Sulanto, and in this video I'm gonna take a look at this little zoom lens, which I think is pretty awesome. But before I talk more about this little lens, please consider subscribing to my channel and tap the bell down there so you'll get notified whenever I post a new video. And I'll usually post a new video twice a week. And now, to the lens. This is the Lumix G 12 to 32mm f 3.5 to 5.6 zoom lens. This is not exactly a new lens. This lens came out in 2013 and it was first offered as a kit lens with the tiny GM1 camera body. But even today this lens is offered as a kit lens, for example with some GX series cameras. I have used this lens many times over the years. But this summer I've used this lens quite a bit, and this review is based on a long-term use, not just some 1 or 2 week loan. The focal length of this lens is from 12 to 32mm, and in full frame terms that means about 24 to 64mm, so it covers everything from a wide angle to a short, very short telephoto lens. I think the wide angle is enough for most people, but the tele end might leave something to be desired for some people. But I guess you can't have everything in this kind of tiny package. Let's first check out the build quality. This is so-called collapsible pancake design, and you have to turn the zoom ring just a bit to make this ready to be used. And when the lens is fully extended, there is a little bit of free play here, but nothing to be worried about. And I think the overall build quality is or looks pretty decent for a lens like this. This is a budget lens, and therefore the whole construction is plastic all the way to the bayonet. But I don't think it's such a big deal with this kind of lens. There is only one ring on the lens, and that's the zoom ring. There is no focus ring at all on this lens, so manual focusing is not practical with this lens. And I think this is the only Panasonic lens that doesn't come with a lens hood, and I don't think you can even buy a lens hood as an accessory, at least from Panasonic. I have no idea if there is a third-party option, but if you know, please let me know in the comments down below. This lens comes in black and also in silver. And then the size and the weight. The size of this lens is absolutely tiny, and this weighs in at about 67 grams without the caps. And the filter thread is 37mm. And because of the extremely small size, this is a very good pair with one of the really small Panasonic Lumix cameras, and why not even some of the tiny Olympus cameras. But this also balances pretty well with the bigger Micro Four Thirds cameras like the G9, and when this is on my G9 it feels like there's no lens at all. The optical construction is 8 elements in 7 groups, and that includes 3 aspherical elements and 1 extra low dispersion element. The minimum focus distance is 20 centimeters from 12 to 20 millimeters and 30 centimeters from there on. And despite of the really small size, there is an optical image stabilizer inside of this lens. So even if you have a camera body without IBIS, you can still get the nice stabilization with this lens. And if you combine this lens with something like G9 or G90, you will get Panasonic's really awesome dual image stabilizer that can offer you really good stabilization. When I mounted this lens on my G90, I could pretty easily get up to 2-second exposures, handheld sharp exposures I mean. What about the optical quality then? Is this lens any good? The answer is yes, it is any good, and it's actually pretty good for such a budget plastic zoom lens. Because of the modest maximum aperture from 3.5 to 5.6, the peak performance or the best sharpness and contrast already come at the wide open or very slightly stopped down aperture. Because in the Micro Four Thirds, f5.6 is already, at least in theory, a little bit in the diffraction zone. But even so, you can pretty safely stop down all the way up to f11 and still get pretty decent results. At f11 you can see the signs of diffraction there, but I think the results are still very usable. But if you go further down to f16, you will see that the image is a bit soft. But having said that, I think for many social media uses, even f16 is very usable indeed. As we know, in Micro Four Thirds, the vignetting, chromatic aberrations and distortions are corrected in camera, and some RAW developers, for example Lightroom, apply those corrections automatically. But some RAW developers, like for example Capture One, give you the option of turning off the corrections. In theory, electronic corrections degrade the image quality, especially towards the corners, depending on how much optical distortion the lens has. But I'm more interested in the end results, and if my pictures look good, I don't care too much about the corrections or whatever is going on under the hood. But I suspect that with this particular lens there is a fair bit of distortion correction going on because this lens is so tiny and it's a budget lens. So I think the optical corrections are not that great. But it doesn't show that much in the final pictures, and that's what counts. The autofocus of this lens is really fast, and there's nothing much more to say about it. It just focuses really quickly and reliably on whatever the subject is. Manual focusing is not practical with this lens, like I said at the beginning, because there is no manual focus ring. So if you really need manual focus, maybe this is not your lens. As a conclusion, I would say this is a really nice and affordable zoom lens, and I'd like to say that this is almost a must if you are a Lumix shooter. But having just said that, I don't think it makes sense to buy this lens separately, because as far as I could find out, the price is around 350 euros or dollars. But in a kit this makes a lot of sense. Yes, I know some of you think that the kit lens is a kit lens for a reason, but I don't think you can categorize kit lenses because there are so many kit lenses, and even these like cheap kit lenses or budget kit lenses are actually pretty decent lenses, and they can produce awesome pictures. I think part of the bad reputation that kit lenses get is because of the fact that this kind of lens is usually most people's very first lens. And when you are a beginner, you don't necessarily know that much about photography, and you may not realize the limitations of this kind of lens, and because of that you may end up with not so great results. But that's not the lens's fault. If I printed any of the pictures I showed you in this video up to A2 size or even bigger, I don't think you or anyone else would suspect a thing. Nobody would suspect that these pictures were shot on a cheap kit lens. Of course, if you need a low light action stopping lens, you will not take this lens. You need something with faster maximum aperture, for example. But I've used this lens for street photography and some family photos and vacation pictures with great success. So I think if you just know how to use this lens properly, it will deliver excellent results. I'd like to know if you have used this lens, if you own this lens, and what kind of experiences you have. Are they similar to mine? Please let me know in the comments down below. So that's it, my review of this tiny Lumix G zoom lens. Thanks so much for watching, but before you go, you may want to check out these two videos.